So that one could argue that there is a direct correlation between the power of the union as an organized force and the benefit that working class people enjoy, whether they're organized or not. So that things such as healthcare, better education, pensions, these things that are being lost today in this recessionary bargaining environment is due to the fact that labor fell from a 30% high.
Yes, and there's a correlation between um, the the fact that after World War II, uh, based upon a wartime economy, that America was able to come out of depression, and a lot of people overlook that. They look at specifically the New Deal, but I'm from the Bay Area, and when I think about the migration of African Americans and other poor people who came to the Bay Area for jobs, specifically in the shipbuilding industry. Henry J. Kaiser, that was big building the Victory ships, and that people were leaving the cotton fields and the coal mines to come west so that they could make $100 a week with overtime and so forth, with health care. And so this was a major thing, but that all had to do with the war. And so someone said the other day that they thought America's greatest moment was the Marshall Plan, when the rebuilding of Europe after the fall of fascism and so forth. But then that quickly began to change when the United States started to recruit Nazis to serve their interest against the Soviet Union. So we can see a breakaway from that whole notion of building up a coalition against fascism and then using fascists to further the goals and aspirations of the United States.
Let me touch on something, because you talked about FDR and the idea that FDR saved the Democratic Party, probably saved the country from revolution. Up until FDR, blacks voted pretty much Republican. Republican was the party of the Lincoln was the mantra, correct. And then FDR and the New Deal, blacks shifted to the Democratic Party. Do you see, and is there potentially any correlation between the emergence of Barack Obama, as had happened to FDR, which stymied America from becoming a more socialist country? At the time of FDR's arrival, communism was at an all-time high, socialist ideology was at an all-time high. Do you see any correlation or potential correlation between this emergence of Barack Obama onto the national scene in terms of rescuing corporate America in the global phenomena that we exist in now?
I think that's a very good question, Chris. I would respond to it in this manner. Yes, I do believe that, because capitalism is in crisis. And so it's unfortunate that more workers really don't understand how our system works. But the bottom line is that we have to look at things in its totality. We have a housing crisis. We now have a crisis on Wall Street, mortgages. We have a crisis of jobs. I mean, well, we've known this for a long time. And NAFTA had a great deal to do with that. We have a war that is costing $435 million a day. It's been estimated that comes to $526 billion, that it could go to $2 to $3 trillion. And the fact that you have an African American who heretofore had never been this close to receiving the nomination speaks to the crisis, and that people, and particularly the white working class, is looking for an alternative, and that they're willing to vote for an African American for president because they believe that he represents the best vehicle for change. That remains to be seen. We have to remember who's backing him and so forth. But the conditions in the country, yes, people don't want to admit that we're in a recession. If you would talk to an African American male in the city of New York, he would tell you that it's not a recession, it's a depression when you look at the unemployment numbers for African American men. And so perception is everything. I think that that's very interesting, considering when you look at the financial sector, that's not a place where you find a lot of black people working. So what that means is that they recognize that there is a time for a new manager. I think that the Bush administration has really been quite naked in their unabashed quest for more profits. We see companies like Kellogg Brown and Root, which once was a subsidiary of Halliburton, that has set up offshore companies to be able to employ American workers who are in Iraq and not have to be responsible for paying tax dollars. There are as many private contractors in Iraq as there are soldiers. And so that tells us something about profiteering from the war and how that's affecting our economy.
Now, they're being paid by the same government. Blackwater has a contract with the State Department using United States tax dollars, albeit borrowed from the Chinese.
Yes.
How does a person justify being in the Marine Corps, making $30,000 a year, wearing the uniform of his country, when a private soldier makes 3 times as much money, no risk of losing their house, their family is more than secure? How does a system justify that and sell that to the working class?
Well, you know, it's called the free enterprise system. But what they do today, it's under the rubric of privatization. And then somehow people have been convinced that when you have something that's private, it is going to be more efficient, it's going to be more resourceful and so forth. And that's just not true. What privatization does is to put the focus on the bottom line as opposed to putting it on the